Dun dun dun! Let's make some noise. We're live. That's the kind of noise we're gonna make. 7:30. I'm a little bit late starting tonight, but starting is actually what I want to talk about tonight. And how do we get started? So let's talk about, for instance, say you're deciding that you want to start a project. For me, I you can start a car, you could a truck, a sand rail, boat, whatever you want to do. For me, I always start with the motor, and so let's talk about starting with a motor project. You're doing a build. How much power do I want to make? So the first thing I ask myself is when I'm starting on some nonsensical thing that I always want to start with. Hey, let's do a Dodge Omni GLHS, whatever. First, you have to decide, what you want to achieve. So the things for a whole vehicle build might be extravagant. I want to run tens or nines or eights or sixes or whatever it is, and then you go about making a list for all those things. How am I going to achieve that? And that's how these projects always start. For a motor buildup, one of the things I like to do is figure out, okay, let's start. I always start off with power because that's the easiest thing. That's how I like people to attack things, more so that when you're coming here, for instance, coming to the live feed, or you're asking a question or making a comment from one of the videos, that you know what kind of question to ask. And by that I mean, hey, look, what's the best camshaft, what's the best intake manifold. The first thing you should be doing is asking yourself, how much power do I want to make? That's the question. That's the first right question. So if you want to build a motor, the first thing you want to do is, hey, how much power do I need? Because once you know that, once you decide, hey, look, I want to make 300 horsepower, I want to make 400, I want to make 1,000, whatever the number is there, but put some sort of realistic number together and go, what is the power output that I need that's going to help me achieve the goal that I want? Maybe you just want a nice stock daily driver. Okay, I need 250 horsepower from my V8. You could almost just throw junkyard parts at it and make it do that. It's not a problem. You just go get a motor from the wrecking yard and it will already do that. But the reason that you want to be specific about the power goal that you need is you want to figure out, even before the power, what do I want to achieve? Okay, I want to go out and I've never had a car that runs tens. I want to run tens. Okay, my goal for tens. Okay, I need to run tens. How much power do I need? Well, if you already have a vehicle, you go, okay, I have this. I have a Biscayne or a C10 or whatever, a Mustang, whatever it is I have. It has this kind of weight. And now with the weight, I'm armed with that. Now I can decide, how much power does it take to run a 10? Get out your old fancy slide rule or go to Wallace Racing, calculators, acceleration calculators. There's many different ways to do this. Ask other guys, come here, say, hey, look, I want to run tens. I got a vehicle that weighs this much. What's it going to take? They'll tell you, go online, go to a calculator, and it'll tell you. Here's what I'll tell you about those things before we start talking about what you need to do to choose the engine, because that's what I like to choose. There are lots of other things too that you need to do: transmission and rear end and gearing and all kinds of things. Getting the suspension, getting it hooked up, all the stuff. The race is always won in the first 60 feet. So you need to do that. Not very many guys charged by people on the big end. That's also possible, but much less common. Usually the guy that gets off the line first, that guy ends up winning more often than not. And you guys can chastise me for that comment, but that's pretty accurate. But the thing is, decide what you want to do. I have the vehicle weight. I can go to the calculator and now figure out how much power I need. When you go do that, don't just try to make that amount of power. Make more than that. Because what happens with these slide rule calculations or the calculators that you use, they'll tell you, under ideal conditions, you can get your 3,200 pound car with 600 horsepower to run 890s. That's an arbitrary number, just making it up. But whatever that number says, that means that all the other things are pretty right. So you have a really good 60-foot time. You have optimum gearing. You have optimum power. You got good aero. You have all of these things. What they're saying is, with that weight and that amount of power, you could theoretically run this mile an hour in this ET. Most people don't, for a variety of different reasons. A guy that runs a 130 or 140 or 150, 60 foot time is going to do a lot better than the guy that runs a 2.0 or a 2.10 or a 2.20 60-foot time. He's not going to have, you guys are not going to have the same thing. The mile an hour might be comparable. If the mile an hour was comparable, one guy hooked a lot better than the other guy. He's going to have a much better ET. He's going to have a much better chance of reaching his ET goal, if that's what it is, rather than a mile an hour goal. The mile an hour goal is easier to achieve because it's just, I have this much power and I've put some of it down and I've got a good mile an hour. But the ET thing is a lot harder. But in order to do that, you need to achieve some power output. So let's say it tells you that you need to make 500 horsepower to achieve your goal. Put something together that's going to make 600. If it's a turbo motor, the sky's the limit anyways. It's going to be 600, 700, 800 horsepower, whatever it is. You're going to be able to turn it up. But make more power than they're suggesting there to achieve your goal. Maybe that's not your goal, but if it is, that's what I would suggest. But how do we go about achieving that? How do we choose our motor? We're going to go get a motor from the wrecking yard. Let's say we don't have a motor, or we want to upgrade a motor that we already have and we want to get something better. How do we pick that? Does it matter what motor we pick? Well, yeah, it does. I would pick different things to achieve different goals. If you're picking if you go to the wrecking yard, let's say you want a small block Chevy to do whatever it is you're doing. You go to the wrecking yard, you look around, what small block Chevy should I pick? Well, more often than not, what I would recommend is you pick the best small block Chevy that you can get there. That's the most powerful one. You're not going to find probably a Gen 2 LT1 base motor because I don't see very many of those there. You might. There are some. Some guys don't want to deal with a problematic OptiSpark ignition setup and that you can convert to carburation and run the conventional distributor. You could do all that. Short of that, you could also go with, in the case of a small block Chevy, you could get a Vortec headed one, an L31, the truck motors. Very good factory heads. There's lots of, it's a small block Chevy, so there's lots of good stuff for them. But does it matter? Do you have to go get that if you're going to change all that? What if you're going to get aftermarket aluminum heads for it, which a small block Chevy deserves to have? What if you're going to change the camshaft? What if you're going to change the intake manifold? Does it really matter what you go get when you go get something if you're going to do that? What if you're going to get a motor just to rebuild everything? You're going to do a 383 stroker. Does it matter what you get? It matters a whole bunch less. Same thing with LS motors. You're going to get an LS motor. Hey, I want to make 700 horsepower. I'm going to run a single turbo on it. I'm going to run a GT45 on it because Richard says, yeah, run a GT45 on it for 700 horsepower. Does it matter if you get a 4.8 or a 5.3? Not really. Both of those will do what you want, and they'll do it with next to nothing. Some sort of small cam and springs, and I like putting ARP head studs and gaskets in it, and you put big enough injectors, and both of those will make it. The 5.3 will do better because it'll have better response because it's going to make more low speed power than the smaller 4.8 does, and because you're going to find nearly equal amounts of those motors there anyway. Just get the bigger one, but either one of them will work. You could also do that with a big block. You could also do that with a small block. You could also do it with a lot of different stuff. You could pick something unique. Maybe you're going there, hey, I want a V6. I want a 4.3 liter V6, or I want an Iron Duke. Whatever it is, the thing that you want, you definitely could do that, and you should get that if that's the direction you want to go. But sometimes there are things that I would pick when I go there, like the photo that I have up, the thumbnail I have up is a small block Chevy. It's a 4-barrel quadrajet factory cast iron quadrajet. I think it's a cast iron quadrajet manifold. I don't think it's aluminum. Those are a little more rare, a little harder to find. They did make those, but they're a little harder to come by. Most of them are cast iron. Does it matter that you get that 4-barrel manifold? Not really. I mean, I like the 4-barrel motors, and I'm drawn to those more than I am the 2-barrel motor. But if we're going to put an RPM air gap on it, it doesn't matter that it had that or it didn't have that. In fact, when I go to the wrecking yard and I'm looking at something like that, unless I'm putting that together as the baseline where I want to run a quadrajet, a stock quadrajet motor from whatever that thing was, some sort of starting point, I really wouldn't get that because I'm going to put an aluminum intake manifold on it anyway. And it's probably going to have a Holly on it. It's probably not going to have a quadrajet. Not that quadrajets aren't good, but we have a whole slew of Hollys when we run stuff. And so I can easily just throw a 650 or 750 or 850 or 950 or 1050, whatever we want on there. And I can make that work. if I'm not going to use that, there's no reason for me when I'm getting that. And all that stuff needs to be decided ahead of time. Don't just go there and get it and then, like I've done many times, just take all the stuff off and just throw it away. Well, anymore now you have to pay for all that stuff, whereas before you just got a whole motor and they just gave you everything, and then a lot of that stuff just gets pitched, or it did back in the day. So you don't really need that. If all you need is a short block, just go get a short block. If you're just going to go get a block, just go get the block. Go take that thing out. Just, it's really easy, especially anymore with impact stuff, to just disassemble the whole thing and throw all the other stuff away. I would make sure that it spins before you get that. It's a lot better to have something that was a working thing before you buy that one that hasn't torn the bearings up and put bearing material into everything and maybe ruin the main boards or something. You have to have it line honed. You don't want to have to do that. So check all that stuff. But a lot of those things you don't need. You don't need to get the 4-barrel small block. Just get if you want a 4-bolt main one, try to find a 4-bolt main one. If you're doing that, just get the block. If you just need the short block, if you need the whole motor, like I said, if you're going to put together a small block and you want it to make good power and you want to use the existing heads, maybe you just want to do a spring upgrade, the Vortec heads are a good way to go. So as I said, so is the LT1. If you're going to get an LS, more likely you're going to find 4.8s and 5.3s, but both of those can be made to have good power. I personally like the 5.3 better. It's bigger to start out with. It makes more low speed power. You can put the turbo on it and it'll have better boost response and stuff. But the 4.8, it'll still work, and it's 4.8. It's kind of cool. It's kind of cool to tell people that you have made that power with that. Same thing with the big blocks. So you go to the big blocks, and when I go there and look at big block Chevys, I go to the truck areas where the big blocks, where they all hang out. And anymore, I mean, I still look at them, but I don't get them nearly as often. The Mark IV stuff, most of those are, they're usually 4-barrel truck motors, but all of the Gen 5 and Gen 6 stuff, that's all 4-bolt main stuff. And a lot of times for the big blocks, since we usually try to make pretty good power with them, it's pretty easy to go into 4-digit power levels with the big block stuff. 4-bolt mains, it just feels nice to have. And since all of those motors are that, we don't have to worry whether or not the one that we would take apart would actually be a 4-bolt. We don't have to drop the pan. Before I would go in and whole saw the pan, just take a look in there and see, are these 4-bolts or not? And that's not cool, because then the pan's no good. That's not a good way to go. So the important thing here is to have, you have a game plan ahead of time. And when you have the game plan, then you can go, okay, before you even step foot in a wrecking yard, or before you buy anything online, before you go searching on Craigslist or wherever you're going to get stuff, what you're going to get. So make a list of things. I like making lists. I like checking it twice, go through all that stuff and go, okay, look, here's a game plan. I want to make this amount of power. It'd be nice to have an all aluminum motor because we all want lightweight stuff, but how can I achieve this? And then you can even do multiple things. A lot of times back in the day when I was buying stuff, I would go through multiple things and go, well, this one has this going for it. This one has this. This one has this. You look and see which one is the best deal, which one costs the less, which one has the most things available for it. Do I have anything existing right now that I can put on there that's basically free? So it adds more value to one particular choice than the other. All of that stuff needs to be done ahead of time. Then you can make your best buying decision. And then when you go to the wrecking yard, you're like, okay, I'm going to put my blinders on. I'm not going to be looking at everything. We're all going to look at everything anyways. But when I go there, it doesn't matter that I find one that has a 4-barrel on it, or one that has a tune port on it, or one that has a crossfire, although a crossfire would be kind of cool. It doesn't matter that it has that. All that I need for today, I'm going there. All I need is some sort of stock short block. So go and look at something. Does this thing work? Take the plugs out. Does it spin? Would that work as a short block? Yes, let's take the heads off and we'll get that one. But if you have a game plan ahead of time, you don't have to go through a whole bunch of different mistakes, and you don't have to go back later on and go after you're sitting there looking at the thing that you just bought, thinking this isn't going to work as great as I wanted it to. I wish I would have chosen something else. And that's when you write this stuff all down ahead of time. that's when you go through all of those decisions and those potential mistakes to have them not become actual mistakes. And that way you make a good decision. You go to the wrecking yard, you get what you want, and then you start your project, and away you go. 2 barrels and 4 barrels and 2 barrels don't mix. I think that they do. They secretly do. See what you guys got going on. 7 o'clock, 7:30, 7:45 now, all as well. I want all the power yet. Sometimes we go there, we don't look for power. Jack, or Jet, you want 400 foot-pounds from 3,000 to 6,500. So then a 6-liter LS, maybe? Richard, I wonder if you've done a comparison with water to air externally mounted versus, say, like a TIC performance manifold style water to air intercooler. There's not going to be where the thing is mounted is going to be less of a concern than whatever the flow rate is that you're trying to pass through it. And then the temperature that you're trying to pass through it. So the thing that you're interested really in is the core size. How is the core sized enough so it does two things? One, is it big enough to where it doesn't dramatically restrict flow? But is it also sized well enough so that it restricts the flow enough that it drops the temperature? So you want two things. You want flow and you want temperature drop, and then whichever exact intercooler you're talking about. But where they're mounted is not really a concern. I want to take a 5.3 and leave one head off. I'll remove the pistons on one side and add piston-weighted idler arms running on a shaft-mounted rocker arm setup. I'll bump the cam up. And why are you going to do that? 2.7-liter slant 4 with 210 horsepower and 220 foot-pounds. Yeah, you let me know how well that works out. Is CNC porting worth the squeeze on a street build? It depends on what you're trying to achieve and what you're starting with. Porting heads, any kind of porting, hand porting or CNC porting, if it's done properly, can add a lot of airflow, and it depends on what you're starting with. Some things already have lots of head flow. Some of them are terrible with head flow. If you're doing a CNC ported head on an LS and you already have more than enough head flow to support the power level that you're trying to get because it's just a mild application, there would be no reason to do it. Richard, I lost sleep last night because of you. You transformed my NA LQ9 build to now learn about building a supercharged LQ9 in the 96 Impala. Will whatever kind of supercharger you're thinking of, and again, this is the thing that you think of ahead of time. Okay, I want a supercharger on there, but will it? One of the things you have to ask yourself with any kind of supercharger was, does it fit under the hood? Centrifugal blowers that mount up front, like Vortex and Torque Storms and Pro Chargers and stuff, that all fits fairly well normally. But all of a sudden, the bolts on top, will that stuff fit? And that's definitely a concern you should ask yourself when you're going through all that. How would you set up a 2.2 turbo distributor for use with a standalone? We're trying to do that on the one that we have, and I'll let you know if it works out. Richard, 400 horsepower is the goal. 5.3s we have. Stage 2 truck cam and springs, 243 head single plane, and 750 vacuum secondary. The horsepower goal is realistic, but you're not the one that was asking about the torque, though, right? No. Okay, that was somebody else. Yeah, you can make more than 400. A stage 2 truck cam. Let's see here. Cathedral port 5.3. Truck cams. Final stage 2. Yeah, you could get there with a stage 2 cam. You know, the stock one, it makes over 400, 410 or something. Which video would I check out? I have a 93 Ford F-150 5-liter 302. I want to build up. I have a lot of 5-liter stuff in there, but it's not specific to a truck application. The motor's really the same. I haven't ever run the truck 302 intake manifold. So if you're staying with that, that's going to be a little bit limiting. Toss out the 3.8 from an SM95 and replace it with a 2.7 slant 4. It's not it's not going to be very smooth, and it's not going to want to make very good power, because your 4-cylinder is not going to be a 4-cylinder anymore. It still has a V8 firing order on it, and the power pulses are not going to be great. Would be the best headers for daily driven LY6. I want it to sound really nice. Any kind of header that you put on there is going to sound different, and then better is going to be a subjective thing. Lots of there's some inexpensive headers on it. I just don't know about what you have to get. The headers that are specific for your chassis, not necessarily the LY6. We run all kinds of different headers on 6-liter stuff. So you have to find one that fits whatever chassis that's in. Cooks or speed engineering. Yep. I have a 93 Ford F-150 302, and I've been watching your videos and I'd like to know if you can give me a roadmap to build the motor to make it better. Yeah, there's lots of 302 videos up there. So that thing suffers from a mild camshaft, heads that are not great, the E7 heads, and then an intake manifold that's also restrictive. So to get power, you have to do one or all of those. Long tube headers will help that. Tuning will help that. A camshaft will help that. Heads will help that. And then I don't know what you want to do with the intake manifold if you want to change that. There are lots of other intake manifolds that you can run. I had a question from earlier stream. Which would have higher horsepower potential, the charge cooling from a carb or the airflow from a DI setup? I don't know. Are you talking about running them on this with the same intake manifold? And I don't have an answer to that. I've never seen anybody try to run a carb on a DI motor then with the DI disconnected. How do you tell the difference between a 4.8 and a 5.3 at the wrecking yard? I don't know. They're really kind of identical. I don't know if somebody has some sort of trick for that. A lot of guys look at the VIN number on the truck. If it's in a truck, if you look at the VIN number, it will tell you what the motor was originally if they haven't replaced it. Been focusing on the Gen 5 V6 with a cam swap, given about 375 horsepower, boosting it to 2 bars. A lot of fun for any mid to lightweight vehicles. Yeah, the getting enough fuel for that thing is the problem with all of those Gen 5 motors. CNC porting on a daily driven L83 in particular. Which L83 are you talking about? Are you talking about the Crossfire Corvette one? Or are you talking about the Gen 5 L83? I wouldn't port the L83 heads if that's what you have on a daily driven car. You're not going to get very much from that. It already has way more cylinder head than you're using. A camshaft would be way more power. Jesse, thank you very much. Did you have a question on that? Back to the valve to cylinder wall question. How much is too little going from a 35 millimeter to a 38 millimeter intake and a 27 to 30 millimeter exhaust? And it's really close. How close does it get? Do you know how close it gets? Australia, what's going on? Got a torque converter from a swap meet that's supposed to be a high stall, 3800. Is there a way for me to check this? I don't know of a way that you can actually verify the stall converter unless it was from a specific manufacturer and had a part number on it. They could give you an idea. Otherwise, there's no real way to check that. You can kind of measure the diameter and maybe get an idea, but even that's not going to be absolute. Little Mark, you've got the 2.8 liter V6 questions. I didn't get to really explain my build. Brett, hi Richard. Thanks for always doing these videos. Would I be sacrificing reliability if I turbo my LQ4 Suburban, building the motor NA for heavy towing or driving mountain passes? As long as the tune is right, the turbo. We have guys that come here. One in particular, he's got a 8.1 with a turbo on it. His has 350,000 miles on it, so he does towing with it all the time. So as long as the other things are right with it, it should work just fine. Turbo LS 427 configuration using twin Garrett 35-900s. How would you recommend selecting the rear housing? Go big first or start with the mid-range? Well, I would slant that based on what you're trying to get done. Are you trying to max these things out? Then I would go with the biggest one. If you're more interested in response, then I probably would go with the smaller ones. If you want to hedge your bets, then go with the middle side. Kyle, a good junkyard combination. TBI 5.7 Buick Roadmaster had flat top, 4-valve relief, hyperprotective pistons, hydraulic roller cam, grabs some Vortec heads from the truck section. Doesn't an L31 does it have a flat top piston? Or does it have a dish piston? Building the Sonoma with my dad. Would upgrading the throttle body in an LY6 truck air intake make any difference? Probably not. Not on a stock one. That has enough flow rate already. That should be a 90 millimeter drive-by-wire throttle body, I think, if I remember right, on the LY6. Yeah, little Mark, did you have questions? Okay, here we go. I picked up 2 motors. The truck, which had the Iron Duke originally for $400, picked up my Supercharger for $30. I'm working on getting a cam. $30, it's a good deal, man. Richard, I have an LS2 with 823 heads on it. It's going in my Tahoe. Do you think a truck Norris cam would be a good option? I'm going to have an LS3 intake and 44-pound injectors. Yeah, the truck Norris cam is a good cam, but are you wanting more power than that? I mean, there are lots of other cams that will make more power on an LS2, especially one with good heads on it. The 823 heads are good heads. Yeah, firing order the slant 4 will be a small issue. Yeah, it's going to be more than a small issue. Stick to trick flow 225 heads, cathedral flow, fast, 459 comp cam, Q9, stock lower end when building a supercharger build. Or do I go back to the drawing board when going with the supercharger? The supercharger will go right on that combination that you just mentioned. Works good NA, it works good with nitrous, it works good with a turbo, it works good with a supercharger. Those things are all just add-ons. They're just value added to your NA combination. So the supercharger will work very well with that. Richard, have you ever messed around with an SB2? I have not. I'm trying to think if the guys at West Tech had any SB2s there. They've had a few like older 10-year-old or whatever cup motors go through there, but I don't remember them. I don't remember any, I think that these are all post SB2 stuff. Overbuilt, what's going on? 18,000s on the intake and 23 on the exhaust. My questions on the M90 supercharger. Does it have coolant holes on the bottom of it? Do I have to run those? No, we don't run those on our LS. It does have them on the V6 that come up through the manifold, but we don't use them because the plates that we have don't have those holes in it. L31 had dish pistons in it. Okay. Seems with turbos that transmissions are having trouble keeping up without spending a lot. Yeah, a 4L60 with a turbo on it. I don't know how long that's going to last. I have a 3800 intercooled Buick Series 3. Nice. I made the intercooler on the CNC at work. Works awesome. But I was thinking of instead of water running alcohol, it stays cooler, stays cold even in the sun. I don't think you want to run a flammable, volatile liquid as your cooling medium. I wouldn't recommend that. Also, please let me know if you want to sell any of the M90 pulleys. Okay. Which I was wondering if your kids are into cars. Not really. I mean, they like cool cars when they see them, but they're not working on them or anything. Mainly, I want to use a Tahoe as a truck, but still have some playroom with it. I've always loved the BTR cams. I've heard the Mad Max cam is good. I don't know anything about that cam. LS2 with 823 heads. Yeah, for a driver, and the truck nurse cam will make good power on that 6-liter. Yeah, Nicholas, your spark plug question, that NGK can't. Those NGK plugs are fine. And just make sure that you bring the gap down on them. Looking for pros and cons for going with a stock torque converter friendly camshaft versus going with something that requires a 3000 stall. Gen 5 LT truck motor. Then I'm doing a DOD delete. Are you putting a camshaft in there? What cam are you putting in there? Or are you wanting a converter friendly camshaft? What would you think of a small block Ford with a 4125 bore and a 3-inch stroke? We've run those before. Dart has the 4125 bore stuff. And you can run it with a 3-inch stroke. You could run a 3250 is common and a 3.4-inch stroke. And I've run both of those. We've run 347s out of the big bore, which works good. And then we've run the 363s out of it too with a 3.4-inch stroke. 3-inch stroke just means you're going to make less power because it's less displacement. Real Arizona Living, thank you very much. Anyone have an MSD BTM control they want to get rid of? I need to keep looking. I think I have one of those. Any personal favorite transmissions? I don't have enough experience with the transmissions, really. A 4L80 is what most guys use if you're going to go with an automatic, some sort of modified version of that. Then manual transmissions, TR6060s, that's a good transmission. $15 pounds are going to be doubling the power output of your NA motor. So that could be a lot of power. Oh, overbuilt. You're getting an 8.8 liter, a PSI motor. Those are cool. H2T Hummer truck. Nice. Well, that'll be a good motor for that. All right, Jay boy. See you. Did my first LS swap last year. That's great. Does intake manifold selection in terms of RPM range change for centrifugal supercharger powers? The intake manifolds still work the same. It's just that with a centrifugal blower, the power output, the peak power output is going to be higher just by putting the blower on. So whatever manifold you have on there, peak power is now going to occur at a higher engine speed because of the rising boost curve. So do you want it higher still than that? Then you pick a manifold that is a shorter runner manifold. What kind of gap is best for boosted stuff? I run 19 or 20 on turbo stuff. Denso or NGK is the only plugs I'll buy. Yeah, we run both of those. Michigan Sound Wizard. I like the 3800 Saga videos. Amazing information. Can I swap a junkyard crankshaft from an NA38 to my L36? I don't know if the crank is the same, and I'll be worried about balance. If the crank is different, I don't know. I don't know if the balance is going to be the same. I don't know if the weighting is the same on that crank, if one's stronger than the other. And then I don't know if they change if the crank is the same, but then they change the rods and the pistons, then the bob weight's going to be weird. So you're probably going to have to rebalance it at the very least. If the odd fire slant 4 doesn't work, I can pop the pistons out and you could do an even fire slant 3. That's also going to be problematic. Have you heard of a rumored big block Duramax? That's news to me, but I'm not up on that kind of stuff though. ProCharger is still a good deal on a 02 to 15 Mustang. Yeah, ProCharger makes good stuff. I did a Vortex supercharger kit for the H1 Hummer with an 8.1 in it. Amos, you put a Vortex on it? Those are good. I like the Vortex guys. Their superchargers are great. Have you ever done a side-by-side comparison of a 671 and a newer higher RPM small displacement blower, roots to roots comparison? I haven't done that. I've never run a 671 versus, are you talking about like a TVS or something like that? I've never compared that. (8.1) Vortex big blocks on these late big blocks. Are the heads any good like stock LS heads, or are they more like legacy big blocks? I see the firing order on 8.1 is like an LS. Yeah, the stock heads are not, they're not as good as like a rec port LS head. They don't flow that much. They'd be more like a cathedral port one. What's the difference between 4 and 8 degrees on the VVT limiter cams? Well, it's 4 degrees, right? Is that what your question is? They're limiting it because if they allow you to run too much variable valve timing, you're going to run into piston to valve clearance on some of the cams because the cams are too big. FYI, guys need a transmission controller. Look, DIY auto tunes. Yeah, to control the transmissions if you're doing mods. Todd, what's going on? XC274 cam good for a daily driver on a 4x4. I actually wouldn't, depending on what else you have done to the motor, I don't think I would pick that on a daily driver. I think I'd pick something smaller. Are spark plugs popping apart because we were building more static pressure or heat, or does anyone know? I haven't had a problem with hurting spark plugs like that. What if I kept the same year and engine platform? I don't know. I don't know. Again, I don't know about balance. I don't know if they balance those individually or if they're doing them when GM put those motors together, if they're doing them as groups. I don't know if they balance every combination or if all the cranks are done and then all the rods are done and all the pistons are done. And then they have A, Bs and Cs and they put them all together to get them within spec, because every OEM combination is not done to zero zero balance, no 0 gram kind of things. There's a tolerance there, and I just don't know what it is. I got chrome molly roller rockers. Do you have lots of spring pressure? 671 and TVS are both roots, but they're comparable in terms of efficiency. A TVS is a twisted, the new modern twisted lobe TVSs are going to be more efficient than a 671. The difference that you would see in a comparison between those two would be more likely having to do with how do you equalize blower speed and displacement of those blowers, because those are going to be different. I have a 6-liter LY6 with 10.7 to 1 compressions going a 4,500 pound truck. Would an LS3 stage 3 cam work better than a stage 4 truck cam? I don't know what the specs are on the two cams that you're talking about. I need you to tell me what the specs are on the exact specs are on the two cams. And then I need you to tell me what you mean by better. I don't know. What are you trying to make these camshafts achieve? I almost never recommend a stage 4 truck cam for anything. Do little Honda street racers scare your old muscle car? If that is to me, I don't have any old muscle cars. I have a truck, and I've done lots of racing with Hondas, so I'm familiar with them. People seem to like bigger cams than they really need. Head flow and decent cams a trick, I would think. I think most people would be more happier with smaller cams and smaller turbos, generally speaking. 8.8s have smaller valve stems like the LS, and 8.1s have bigger valve stems. Amos, is the 8.8 head different than the 8.1? Or is the 8.8 heads, are they better? Where's the best place to get sensors? I get all mine from the wrecking yard. Otherwise, the dealership is a good place, or you could get them at Rock Auto too. Just pick whichever cam where you want your power to be. Yep. I take it that automatic transmissions are better with turbos. They allow for slip, whereas manuals are more violent. On the 360 Magnum, did you test a kegger manifold versus a dual plane? Yeah, we did. We did do that test. In fact, I did that for Engine Masters. I'm pretty sure that the dual plane was a good bit better than the kegger was. Dodge Magnum. Intake test. Here we go. Final. We did a stock one. We did the UT Awesome modified kegger one, and then we did a carburetor. Yeah, the dual plane's better. The kegger was a little better below 3,300, but worse everywhere else. Is California trying to ban leaded fuel? I haven't heard anything about that. Switching from cell to laptop. Okay, 224, 230 is a truck cam, 233, 239. People say the bigger LS3 cam will make the truck sluggish down low. Do you have a Juan Pablo? Do you have a stall converter in that thing? A stall converter would help that. GW, yeah, the smaller cam and turbos, especially with turbo stuff, is the way to go. Currently have a hydraulic XE274 on my 393. Plan to switch to an XE solid lifter and put twin 76s. Yeah, that would be a lot. How much power can a Dart and Sleeve K24 hold? I don't know. I've never seen the limit of that. Amos, yes, the 8.8 heads have LS1 rockers. They use LS1 springs, so I use PAC 1219s. They flow a bit more and are rec port. Okay, so the port is even different on. So the intake manifold then must also be different on the 8.8. Sleeves will hold up to 1200. Somebody said. I have 222, 232 cam in my truck. It's sluggish down low, but it rips up top. Drive it every day. It's not that bad. Oh, I just lost my light. Richard, have you researched rod ratio? Yeah, I have. Board stroke ratios, piston speed, their effect on engine efficiency. It seems there would be an ideal for most engines. I disagree with that, and I've talked about that a lot. I don't think that there is an ideal one because is it ideal at 3,000? Is it ideal at 7,000 or 10,000? Where is it ideal at? And is it ideal? Um, Rod ratio. There's a lot of discussion that we've had about that back and forth, and that's not those things. I would never go looking for any of those things in what we talk about in terms of making power. Those areas wouldn't even make it in the top 20 things I would look for in terms of power. Todd, what's going on? Dean, the dancing machine. There he is. Juan Pablo, you have a 3600 stall. You should put the bigger cam in it then. What were the cam specs on the Kegger versus the dual plane? I think we ran it stock. Oh no, it can't be stock. It's making 350. So let's see. It is a comp 2-745-9. So it's a 212, 218, 480 lift, 114 LSA. It's a 264 comp cam. So it's a small comp cam. Working on my car with Richard's soothing voice in the background. I have a 2800 stall. I should have gone bigger. I'm headed out to the ranch to pick up the black truck, a 4x to tow it in and pull the motor. Any plans for Bonneville again? I do want to run Bonneville. Know a good page for engine exhaust system diagrams with part numbers for a Silverado. Does anybody have anything for shadow ops on that? Does anybody know what are you looking at for a diagram on how the exhaust needs to go? 8.8s have injectors in the heads. They use a valley plate, and the heads are a different angle, a different intake. Okay. Stock 102 millimeter throttle body. Cool. I'm turbocharging my non-PI 4.6 in the Grand Marquis. Questions about oiling. That's enough oil for the turbo and the motor as long as you have good drain back. In regards to mild cams, the most power gain I see is from using a stage 1 VVT cam. I haven't tested VVT cams in the Gen 3 and 4 LS motors. And the LT stuff, they work really good. I have some 6-inch Cleveland rods to sell for lots of money. Yeah, I don't think that's going to help. Ever thought of testing cranking PSI? Different cams will create using the same heads and bottom end. I've done that before when I did a big. In fact, I think I did that on when I ran all the stock cams. I think I did cranking compression on all of the cams before we dyno tested them. People think that that's an indication of power, but it's really not. It's not a perfect indicator. Can you mount a turbo up and down instead of sideways? I can't find anything on it. I've never seen anything. I've never seen it before. I'd be worried about the oil drain. Yeah, Kyle, happy to help. We ran a few things on the Magnums. Just a stock exhaust system. I need to know if both exhaust manifolds require gaskets at the flange for the cat's mount. If it's a truck one like an LS, they have different manifolds on each side. Todd, I rescued a 3-year-old German Shepherd. Oh, very cool. We're gonna put her down because she has a biting issue. She's a little bit bitey. As far as she hasn't bit me, but she's lunged at a few of my friends. I do miss having a dog. Yep, dogs are awesome. I'm getting the 4.8 swapped and trying to get hardware for the manifold flanges for the cat's mount too. What twin turbos do you recommend for my 393? Well, 2 GT45s will be more than enough for you to run 850s. Wouldn't the amount of air pumped at an engine speed be a better metric than compression? So you want to do you want to measure the air going into the intake while you're doing a cranking compression test? I'm not sure that I understand what you're doing. If you're measuring the airflow while the motor's running, that's a really good indicator. But if you're measuring the airflow while it's running, you could also just measure the power output. Problem's going to be some of the exhaust manifolds you use a donut. Yeah, they have like an O-ring that goes in them. Some of them don't. Some of them are just flat to flat. And some of them don't. It just depends on the year and where the truck was built. Honestly, it does seem like some of that stuff is arbitrary. I really hope that they have rhyme and reason applied to how they were done and stuff, but sometimes it seems like they don't. How much will a stock GM 400 block take? If you have a torque storm on it, it will take all of that torque storm. Yeah, the puppies are doing good. They're more than a year old now, so they're doing good. Milo's doing good too. Got to keep him walking and keep him running, keep him in good shape. It's a good camshaft for a small block 350, 9.6 to 1 compression with 180cc Flowtech hydraulic flat tappet springs, 550 lift max. If you want a hydraulic flat tappet small block Chevy cam, let's go to the Comp Cams catalog here. I will give you some sort of magic part number. How about a 4-pattern camshaft? No, you don't need that. If that's what you're thinking. Come on. Nitrous. Pure energy. Here we go. Extreme Energy hydraulic flat tappet. I would pick maybe a 262, an XE262H, or an XE268H. So that's a 218, 224, or a 224, 230 for that. None of those are going to be anywhere near 550 lift. They're going to be 470 or something, 470, 480 lift. Oilless comp turbos can be mounted in any direction. Are you sure about that? Because I still think that they have oil in them. I think that you'd want to make sure that the oil is in contact and not away from the bearing. Dart 230, Iron Eagle, Platinum heads, horsepower level. I have no idea. I don't know about those particular heads. You know what they flow? If you could tell us the flow rate, we could tell you what kind of NA power they'll support. And for turbo or boosted power, they'll support any level. YZ, if you're looking for stock converter L83 stuff, talk to the guys at Brian Chili Racing. Get a roller cam, quality control, and flat tappets are problematic. That's what Overbuilt says. There's a Viper rolling around with one pointing straight up. Positive grease fittings. Okay. John, I don't know what your question is. The turbo in any direction. That would be convenient, that just so that you could position. Although it's always a problem with turbos because you got so many things. You got to get the air in and then out of the compressor side, and then in and out of the hot side. And then it's just it's 4 tubes no matter what. It's the angles machined on a lifter crown. I haven't had problems with the stuff we've run lately. We take great care during our break-in procedure, but although some of the lifters that we have been sitting for probably 10 years, so maybe they're old stuff. Two more minutes, and I have no poll for tonight. Any issues with LSs you change from a wrecking yard? No, I always run them when they're stock. I put them up on the dyno, make sure that they're okay. It's a good idea. You're going to have to definitely put new oil in there. Oil and filter. It's good to clean all that stuff out if you can. Has anyone done a back-to-back magazine style swap of new pistons and ring packages that shows any great numbers? Are you talking about swapping in just a new version of the same piston and the same ring, or are you changing the piston design or changing the ring design? What kind of test do you want there? And are you changing both of them at the same time? Because it seems like it'd be better to do one of those things at a time. Richard, do you have any experience with whole set turbos? Yeah, I run whole sets a lot. The guys from HP Performance used to use whole sets for a lot of their kits. Yeah, if you change the piston and you change it from a dish to a flat top to a dome or whatever, you're obviously going to change the compression. That should change the power. And I hope to do something with Lake Speed. We spoke for a while at MPMC about doing. I want to do a ring thing, and it's soon it devolves or evolves into something a lot more than. Oh yeah, I'll fly out. We'll get a profilometer on there. We'll check the. we'll check the crosshatch. We'll check the rings. We'll make sure that the ring gaps are not flared on the outer edge, and it turns into all this kind of stuff. But he's amazing, and he's ultra enthusiastic, and I love that about him. Kyle, you're building a Magnum 360 like the dual plane 212 218 combo, 3,500-pound Dakota. That should be good. Torquey tire smoker. Would you bother investing time in a quadrajet or just grab a Holly? Either one of those I think will work on there. I don't know what I don't remember if the manifold had a provision for if it was set up for a quadrajet or not, but it made over 400 foot-pounds and 350 foot-pounds of torque. The dual plane made more torque than the kegger did too. Made more peak torque than the kegger did. It just lost just that ever so slightly. So how much was this here? Yeah, from it lost 4 foot-pounds and then just was better everywhere after that and made more peak. Not a lot more peak, but some. 403. Yeah, 6 or 7 foot-pounds more peak. And then I think the difference was out here at past 5,000, 322 versus 350. So a pretty good bit of horsepower. Any chance for a Napier second ring test? The test that we're doing is going to be on a stock piston. Did you post about dyno pulls on the 5.3? Yeah, it was $499. $499. And on that note, it is time to go. I'll be back tomorrow morning. I'm still working. I need to get my video done on the twin turbo, intercooled, tunnel rammed, big block Chevy. I forgot draw through carbureted deal. So I need to get that video up, but I'll see you guys all tomorrow.